Video games have been around for a long time now, and in that time they've changed significantly from what they once were. In fact, in 2021, the video game industry was the largest entertainment sector in the world. With 1.3 billion disabled people worldwide, an estimated 400 million of which play video games, there's been more and more talk about making games more accessible. Many studios have started to introduce accessibility settings into their products, such as the ability to remap controls or in some cases changing how the entire game plays. However, there are still plenty of games that simply aren't accessible. Grant Stoner is a gaming journalist who specialises in covering the industry from a disabled perspective. He has spinal muscular atrophy type 2.
It's a progressive neuromuscular disability that weakens muscles over time. So, growing up, I really didn't need many options or accommodations. And then as I got older, my disability progressed, and that's when I needed like maybe modifications on my controllers or variant options. It primarily depends on what type of game
Mhm.
I'm playing. Like usually with shooters and such, I need like customized controls, toggles for like aiming and sprinting. Um, Depending on like what the action is, maybe co-op to have my friends pick up some of the slack if my hands are too tired. Um, it also depends on my energy levels throughout the day. So usually if I'm playing a very action intensive game later on, I'm more tired.
Mhm.
But if I were to play it, say, right around this time, I can usually play for several hours without breaks or assistance.
Have there ever been any games that you've like really wanted to play but couldn't because you couldn't access it?
Yeah, The Last of Us 2. The Last of Us 2 was arguably the game that put accessibility journalism on the map in the games industry. It's really the game that made publications realize that, oh, this is a beat that's worth covering. Um, I can't use PlayStation controllers because of the progression of disease. I used to be able to, but as I got older, I lost that ability. So even though that game has won countless awards for its accessible innovations, the studio itself is very committed to disabled players. I've never actually been able to play it.
The Last of Us Part 2 didn't just win awards, it was praised for being potentially the most accessible game ever. Therein lies the problem. Accessibility is not one size fits all. Special Effect, a charity based out of Charlbury, Oxfordshire, are trying to fix that by producing technology to aid disabled gamers. Nomi Gallagher, an occupational therapist, demonstrated some of the technology they offer.
So this is a switch interface that we use, honestly, most of the time. Um, it is an Xbox controller, but we can use it as a switch interface for other devices as well. So at the back of it, you've got 3.5mm jacks that we use to then plug in a range of buttons, and at the side, we have the USB port so we can plug in joysticks as well. This one in particular is useful for people who have quite large gross arm movements rather than small fine motor movements. So for example, you could use a whole hand or a whole arm, that kind of a thing, to move around. And we have a various range of joysticks depending on exactly what the person's needs are, and we'll tailor it for what their movements are rather than making them fit a certain type of joystick. So using the larger joystick, so I can just move left, right, forward and backwards, and then I can just head out to the door, head down to the beach. I'm just going to parkour it because it's easier this way, and I don't have a right stick currently, so I'm a bit trapped, I think.
Is it possible to set up a second joystick?
Yeah. Yep, so you can add a second joystick. You can also use something called Copilot mode, which is technically what this is set up for at the moment, but we'd need that extra controller to use. So normally we would get someone alongside to Copilot. Would you like to give that a go?
Sure.
So this is a great way for people who might not have access to everything, but still want to play the game, so they can have a friend, family member, maybe even the carer, sort of helping them out for the buttons that they can't access. Within the Xbox Accessories app, you can map these buttons to be, say, the trigger or the bumper or whatever button you want. But generally, it's more like an interface for plugging extras in.
Yeah. I think that was something I thought as well about the bumpers, is like, that must make, like, if you have them all out here, that must be a lot of, like, buttons to keep track of.
I think our record for the number of extra buttons we've added for someone's setup is about 16. So it can become quite a bit, but surprisingly the amount of people who get very used to exactly where they place their buttons. And we use a Velcro tray to keep everything nice and firm, so if you have large movements, or even if you just knock something over, you won't move your buttons too much.
I think that definitely makes sense, because I know, like, if I'm playing on my Switch and then like go to play on my PlayStation, my brain is just buttons being different. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I could definitely see someone getting just so used to this that that's natural.
And it's not just with hands as well. We've got some people who just completely play with their feet, with their voice, all sorts of different things. The aim is to just play however is most comfortable for that person, rather than use it as a sort of therapeutic input, which is normally what OTs do.
Is Xbox easier to work with, or PlayStation, or are they about the same?
If we're talking about Xbox One versus PlayStation 4, they're about the same. At the moment, we can't get as much working on PlayStation 5. We're just hoping a Switch interface comes out that will enable us to do that. So PS5 is a bit of a tricky one currently, but PS4, Xbox One, the newer Xbox and Nintendo Switch, we can get this working or something similar. So it really just depends on the types of games that the people want to play. So each console has their own way of sort of being able to remap things at a console level. So they all kind of have their own ways of doing a lot of things. They're just not always obvious. So we've got a lot of blog posts that we write about various great settings, great games that work well for people, and sort of tutorial of how to set things up. Which can be great because we just send that to people who are interested, and they're able to sort that for themselves and customize it to what they need.
Harry, a technical specialist, also spoke about how they work with developers and some of the other technology that is used within the industry.
So the Xbox Adaptive Controller came out, and then people were rushing out and buying the new controller. So we got the controller and we can play, but of course they didn't have all the switches and stuff to go with it, and the switches themselves, one button would cost like 40, 50 quid, because again it's being made by, you know, small, very niche companies and individuals. So again, we were very fortunate to get invited by Logitech and Microsoft again to make what's called the Logitech Adaptive Gaming Kit, and that is a box that comes with a couple of Velcro trays, about 12 to 15 different kinds of switches, heavy ones, light ones, big ones, small ones, stickers and things. So the situation became someone with a disability would go into, you know, their video game shop, and they've seen a big new game has come out, and so they go in, and just like everyone else, they can go in, they can pick up their console, they can pick up their game, they can pick up their controller, they can pick up all the switches and the peripherals that they need at a reasonable price. So that controller is about £70 when it first came out. It may be less or more now, I haven't checked. And then for the entire kit of 15 switches is about the same, £70. And so from one button being 40 to 15 or so being 70 is a huge saving for people. Not to mention the fact that because it's made and supported by Microsoft, it's plug and play. You don't need to hack or cheat it or do any, you know, little tricks. And then other companies saw that it was having a huge impact. So Nintendo very quickly followed suit got it all called up here, and they reached out to a third-party company called Hori. If you've ever come across them, they make fighting joysticks and things like that normally. And they came out with their own version, which is, as you can see, ta-da, here's one I made earlier, the Hori Flex, and it works more or less the same way. They had a different, idea for the buttons. Again, this is a company that specializes in fighting game joysticks usually, so you can totally see the influence there of the Street Fighter vibes and things, but it's working off the exact same mentality of rather than trying to predict and pre-build something for every individual on Earth. It's saying, hey, we're just going to give you the choice to make your own thing, and you do what works with you. And so that's like Microsoft has done it, Nintendo has now done it, and of course recently we were lucky enough to be invited by Sony, and they've recently announced the project Leonardo, which is yet to come out. It's still a work in progress, but that's their interpretation and version of these interfaces.
Harry also opened up about why he does his job and what he enjoys about it.
It's awesome, man. Why do I do it? I get to help people. For me, that's just the biggest thing. Is a lot of people in their situation, especially with a physical disability, is your agency has been taken away. You're no longer, or you may have difficulties in just enforcing your will onto the world. You can't just go and do what you want to do. You can't be who you want to be. You can't engage with the things that you want to engage with because you're physically barred from it. And so you end up with these people who are just feeling like they're on the sidelines of life, just looking in. They're looking at a brother or a sister or a friend playing a game that they so want to be able to play, and they can't. And I in some small way I get to step into that situation and go, well, how we can do something about that. We can change that. And so that for me, that's the big thing, is I get to help people, and I like puzzles and like abstract thinking. So for me, you get a situation where it's like there's someone on the other side of the planet, and they we need two different translators to make sure that we can understand them, and we're not sure if it's going to work, and they can only access, they can only move one eye because they've got this super complex injury, but they really want to play Fortnite or something like that. It's like, can we make it happen? It's like, I don't know, but I'm going to try, man. I'm going to have a really good time trying. And and getting to use my brain in that sort of way to solve really complex puzzles that then end up helping people and bring them into the world of gaming that I've loved my whole life. I love it. It's a dream. So
Nomi went on to speak about a young man they were able to help called Aaron, who has muscular dystrophy, and how proud she is to be able to help him get back to playing games.
So I'll be honest, I didn't think special effects would be able to help me, but they tried different angles, different positions, and they made this brilliant system that I use today.
He has very limited movement in his fingers. He could barely get one or two buttons, but he absolutely loves games and really wanted to play really complicated things like Cuphead, Fortnite, things like that. And they require so many more buttons, and we were a bit stumped as to what we could do. And then we were like, do you happen to have any foot movement or anything else that we could use? And he was like, oh, I've got good movement with my feet. So we were able to put two standard controllers on the floor, mounted slightly, and he was able to get two standard controllers, pretty much most of the access with his feet, and then just a few buttons for the triggers and bumpers with his hands. He could play the whole game. He completed Cuphead and the sequel. I've never known someone who's that good. Makes it look easy, he really does.
With my disability, I'm limited to do things. I don't want to sound like a gameaholic, but it was one of the only things I could do for enjoyment. So gaming has really opened up that door for me, and my life was restored back to the way it was.
Finally, Grant also opened up about his career as a journalist and how he sees the gaming industry as a whole has and is approaching accessibility.
I wanted to be a journalist since I was a little kid reading Game Informer magazine. I actually never really wanted to cover accessibility until college, whenever I wrote a review for my school newspaper for the Nintendo Switch, my friend who was the editor at the time said, "Why don't you do a accessibility review?" I was like, that's not really my thing. He was like, "Either do it or I'm not publishing your review." I was like, all right, so I did, and I ended up running second place in the Pennsylvania statewide journalism awards for the review category. And at that moment, I was like, wow, maybe there is a need for this kind of coverage.
So overall, do you think the games industry does enough for accessibility? Do you think it's going in the right direction, or do you think more needs to be done?
It's definitely going in the right direction, but more always needs to be done. There should never be a point where developers are, okay, we solved accessibility, because there's always going to be some group that still encounters barriers. So developers need to keep refining, innovating, and paying attention to disabled voices to see if their needs are being properly met.
It's clear to see accessibility has come a long way in recent years, but a point emphasised by both Grant and Special Effect is there's not one simple solution. However, with companies like Sony recently revealing the Project Leonardo disability-friendly controller and adding the ability to filter their online store based on the adjustments games offer, it's clear that accessibility within the games industry is only getting better.